He was memorizing his father's voice from an old phone message, afraid that one day he would forget exactly how it sounded. He started sleeping with his father's old dog tags tucked under his pillow, telling no one, not even his mother. He wanted, if it was possible, to be the one to walk through the door himself. The folded flag rests on the mantel, its 13 stars catching the late afternoon light. In the front room of a modest home outside Dayton, Ohio, 40 people move quietly, speaking in hushed tones, holding paper cups of coffee they are not really drinking. Sarah Turner stands near the window, her hands wrapped around a photograph of her husband in dress uniform. She has worn this same dark cardigan for nearly every hard day of the last 11 months. 15-year-old Ethan sits alone on the porch steps outside, still in the suit he did not want to wear. He was memorizing his father's voice from an old phone message, afraid that one day he would forget exactly how it sounded.
Today is not technically a funeral. The Army has a quieter term for it, a memorial service without remains, the closest thing to closure a family receives when a body is never recovered. 1 year ago, Staff Sergeant Michael Turner's convoy was ambushed on a supply route outside a checkpoint that no two maps fully agreed on. The first report said 3 killed, 2 wounded, 1 unaccounted for. 6 months later, that report was quietly revised, presumed killed in action. Sarah remembers the 2 soldiers who came to her door on a Tuesday morning in dress blues. She remembers thinking, before either of them said a word, that dress blues at 8 in the morning never once meant good news. She remembers Ethan, 13 at the time, standing behind her in the hallway, already understanding from her face alone. For 11 months, Sarah kept his side of the closet exactly as he left it. She kept paying for a phone plan he was no longer using, just so the number would still be his if it ever rang. Neighbors brought casseroles for the first 2 weeks, then slowly stopped, the way grief eventually asks everyone else to move on while the family cannot. Ethan quit the baseball team he and his father used to practice with every evening after work. He told his mother the fields reminded him too much of Saturday mornings that would not come back. Sarah found herself rehearsing over and over the version of the story she would eventually have to tell her son when he was old enough to ask harder questions. The Army offered grief counseling, a folded flag, a case file that would likely stay open forever, marked unresolved. Base Command explained gently but clearly that in that region, without recovered remains, official presumption of death was the only path forward for benefits and closure. Sarah's mother moved in for a while to help, quietly noting that Sarah had stopped setting 2 coffee cups out of habit only after the 6th month. Ethan's grades slipped that spring, though his teachers never mentioned it directly, choosing instead to simply give him room. He started sleeping with his father's old dog tags tucked under his pillow, telling no one, not even his mother. Sarah found a part-time job at the local hardware store. Not because they needed the money, but because the quiet of an empty house had become harder to sit inside than she expected. She learned to answer strangers' condolences with a practiced, gentle nod, a small script of her own she had perfected out of necessity. On the anniversary of the ambush, she and Ethan visited the recruiting office where Michael had first signed up, standing outside it in silence for almost 10 minutes before either of them spoke. 6 weeks before today's service, an Army liaison sat with Sarah at her kitchen table and asked, as kindly as anyone can ask such a question, whether she was ready to hold a memorial. She said yes because she needed a date on the calendar, something to walk toward instead of endless waiting. What none of them knew, 3,000 miles away in a region the news had already stopped covering, was that Michael Turner was still alive. After the ambush, he had been separated from his unit, wounded, and taken by a local faction that held him in a series of remote compounds for reasons that shifted depending on who was asking. For months, there was no communication in either direction, no proof of life reaching command, nothing to contradict the worst assumption. He does not talk in detail about those months, only that he thought constantly about a porch, a baseball glove, and the sound of his son's voice changing on the last phone call before deployment. He rationed a single photograph he had kept folded in his boot since the day of the ambush, careful never to let it be seen or taken. There were long stretches with no language he understood spoken around him,
and longer stretches where he simply counted days using marks he scratched into a wall out of sight.
An opportunity came during a transfer between compounds, a moment of confusion at a checkpoint that Michael had spent weeks quietly preparing for. He does not call it heroic. He calls it simply the only chance he was going to get. What followed was 11 days of moving mostly at night, avoiding roads, trading what little he had for water and direction from people who owed him nothing and helped him anyway. When he finally reached a coalition outpost, exhausted and nearly unrecognizable, it took military intelligence nearly 72 hours to fully confirm his identity. Command made a deliberate decision in that window, choosing accuracy over speed, refusing to notify a grieving family until they were absolutely certain there would be no second devastating call. Michael asked for exactly one thing once his identity was confirmed: that no one tell his wife by phone. He wanted, if it was possible, to be the one to walk through the door himself. A liaison officer, breaking protocol slightly, made a single call, not to Sarah, but to a next-door neighbor who had kept a spare key for 11 months, asking only one quiet question: is the memorial still happening today? Inside the house, the reception moves into its final hour. A neighbor rises to share a story about Michael fixing her fence one summer for nothing but a plate of dinner. Sarah stands to speak, holding a small framed photo, her voice steady in a way that costs her everything to maintain. She says his name once, clearly, the way she used to say it across a kitchen at dinner time. She is midway through a sentence about the sound of his laugh when the front door opens behind her. The room does not immediately understand what it is looking at. A man in a plain jacket, thinner than his photographs, stands in the doorway where the light briefly outlines him. Ethan sees him first, frozen on the porch side of the doorway, unable to move or speak. Sarah turns, the photo still in her hand, and for one full second her mind refuses the information her eyes are sending it. Then she says his name, not as a question this time, but as a fact she is only now allowed to believe. The room that had been quietly mourning him for 11 months erupts into something too large for any single word to hold. Ethan reaches him before anyone else, and Michael's arms close around his son the way they had rehearsed only in memory for almost a year. Sarah reaches them both, the framed photo slipping gently to the floor, no longer needed as a substitute for the man himself. Neighbors who came to grieve stand instead in stunned, tearful silence, then applause, then something closer to disbelief giving way to joy. Michael Turner does not give a speech. He simply says he is sorry it took this long, and that he thought about this exact room every single day he was gone. In the weeks that followed, Michael was formally debriefed, medically evaluated, and given time that the Army rarely manages to give returning families: space, without a deadline, to simply be back together. Ethan went back out to the baseball field that spring, his father in the stands for the first practice, saying almost nothing, just watching. Sarah kept the framed photo from that day on the mantel where the folded flag once sat, a small, deliberate choice about which object gets to represent this family's story going forward. This story is a tribute to families who wait through the hardest kind of uncertainty, and to the service members who carry them home in their thoughts, even from places no letter could reach. If a version of this waiting has touched your own family, you already understand exactly what that doorway meant.